Hi, everybody. Today we're talking about the challenges associated with managers versus employees versus HR having to decide how to accommodate and when to accommodate and maybe when to even start the ADA accommodation. Carlos works as a customer service associate in a retail chain. He recently developed a chronic condition that limits his ability to stand for long periods of time. And he submitted a formal request for an accommodation, including a chair and shorter stint. The initial interactive process occurred with Carlos's manager, and she implemented a temporary accommodation, allowing him to use a chair. However, she didn't address the shorter step. After 2 weeks, Carlos said, "This is not working, and my condition's getting worse." And the manager said, "I'm really not quite sure what I should do now." She's not sure if she should hold another meeting. She can tell that what happened so far is not working. So let's start at the front end. When an employee provides a supervisor enough information for the supervisor to understand there's a medical issue that's impacting their ability to do their job. That's all we're talking about, everybody. When you start with that notification, the question is, what is your procedure? Are you allowing supervisors to engage even informally in an interactive process? I would say if everybody gets a chair and it's not a problem, sure. If everybody gets a keyboard and it's not a problem, sure. If everybody gets a sit-stand desk, sure, we can get that for you. But that's very different than a supervisor acting as if they are formally accommodating somebody when they're really just informally meeting a need. There's nothing wrong with allowing that to occur if it's something that works and it's something that's easy and simple and it's something you could do for somebody else. But as soon as you start crossing the barrier, we're modifying the way that you operate and perform the functions of the job. Now we're having a different discussion. Now we're talking about what functions of the job are you able to perform with or without an accommodation? That's an ADA accommodation request. Now, of course, if you're pregnant and you're asking that, and Carlos isn't, it would be only what functions of the job, essential functions, can't you perform? But if you're not pregnant and this is a straight ADA request, we're expecting you to be able to perform all of the essential functions of the job with the accommodation. So our job is to make sure we understand, how does your disability, what is your restriction? How often do you need to sit, Carlos? How often do you need to take a break? Is it every hour? Is it every 20 minutes? Is it every 2 hours? Well, you get a break on average every 2 hours already, either lunch or a morning or afternoon break, so maybe more than that. But as soon as we identify how often they need to take a break, then the question is, can he still get all of his work done, all of the essential functions of the job, if he needs to take a break? Too often, can somebody else step in and perform that job function if he can't? So what we're trying to do is, from the beginning, everybody, let's get human resources involved. When Sophie, the supervisor, was informed about the need for a stool and breaks as an accommodation, shorter shifts, when you are modifying a shift, you're modifying the job function. Typically, everybody has, unless you're an exempt employee, very clear start and end times. When they can no longer do that, specifically in a retail environment, that is a very clear accommodation. You would be modifying the job to do that. Now, could we do that? Sure. If it was for a short period of time to identify change in medication or give them a chance to heal, that might be a reasonable accommodation if it's not an undue hardship. But it would never be a permanent accommodation, because if the job is a full-time job, you'd actually have to have a part-time job with shorter shifts for Carlos to even be eligible to have that as an option, as an accommodation. If we're accommodating time off or modified work hours, if it's not the same job when you get done doing that because everybody else is doing something differently, then that is not going to be reasonable unless you can do it for only a short period of time and it doesn't impact the other operations of the organization. That's a very serious discussion, all that lead under ADA. Remember, FMLA is a leave regulation. So Carlos could have shorter shifts under FMLA, and with his chair, until he exhausted all the FMLA. And then when we needed to go from FMLA to ADA, because all the time we used for FMLA to provide those shorter shifts got exhausted, now it's an ADA accommodation request. And now the question is, do we want to have a permanent part-time job for Carlos? And my suggestion is the answer is no. So you're going to be looking at the interactive process now to verify whether it's an undue hardship for the shorter shifts, or whether maybe we can provide him a better chair that would not require him to take shorter shifts. But either way, if this is a safety issue for Carlos for his medical condition, we will not be able to have him be at work until we modify and address this issue. And it could be leave he gets temporarily while we engage in the interactive process to determine if there's any other accommodation that would allow him to perform all the essential functions of his job, including the full shift. And do we balance Carlos' needs against the operational demands? Yes, because who's going to be taking over that work when Carlos has a shorter shift? So that's the main high-level points that you're going to be paying attention to in this kind of a process. HR wants to ensure transparency and fairness throughout the process. And we implement standard operating procedures for the ADA accommodation blueprint process to assure that no matter how many times we have to interact with an employee, if it's because the original accommodation wasn't effective, which in this case it was with Carlos, but we have a supervisor documenting something and we're not even clear that they engaged in the ADA process correctly. I would say the takeaway of this scenario, more importantly than anything else, is supervisors should not be making decisions about accommodations unless it is something that you will do for everybody and always has, and all they need to do is ask. And of course, we'll get you a keyboard. Of course, we'll get you a chair. Of course, we'll get you a stand desk, because everybody can have one. But if we're getting it for you because of your disability, because you need an accommodation, that would be a formal standard operating procedure that should be controlled by human resources. Or you may just find yourself in litigation because the supervisor doesn't quite understand the depth of requirement of compliance the American with Disability Act requires. Thanks, everybody. Hope you're having a nice time getting ready for the holidays.